Hello everyone, this is Captain Shadow. We are starting our night flight from Zurich to Bolzano, a short journey, lasting just 39 minutes in the air, but filled with reflections and emotions. Below us stretches a dark nocturnal landscape, and ahead only the outlines of the Alps and the Dolomites, although the distance is about 450 kilometers. This small stretch will serve as the backdrop for stories that are tough and dramatic. Today, I want to share with you 3 true stories of cargo plane disasters. These are FedEx Flight 80, UPS Flight 6, and Emory Worldwide Flight 17. Each happened in reality, and each reveals to us the painful truth about how little separates routine from tragedy. I will not delve into complex technical issues or detailed analyses of black box recordings. My goal is to show you the human side, his fear, determination, and helplessness in situations where all known procedures prove inadequate. These are stories about seconds in which experienced pilots face unpredictable forces of nature, faulty mechanisms, or destructive fire. Stories that remind us of how fragile human life is in a steel structure, suspended thousands of meters above the ground. Before we start the first main story about FedEx 80, I would like to remind you that preparing this type of material is a lot of work. If you appreciate this content, I care about your support. Every help makes it possible for me to create more episodes, reach these stories to a wider audience, and bring the human side of aviation closer to you. March 23rd, 2009. Early morning shrouded in mist, humid air, and gusty winds set the tone at Narita Airport in Japan. McDonnell Douglas MD-11F, FedEx Flight 8 approaches runway 34 left. On board are 2 experienced pilots, Captain Kevin Mosley, a man with thousands of flight hours behind the controls, and First Officer Anthony Pino, equally skilled and trusted. Both feel the exhaustion after a long-haul flight. This flight was supposed to be routine, a cargo trip from Guangzhou to Tokyo, but the unpredictable weather quickly altered the scenario. From the cockpit, the view stretched to clouds swirling above the runway. The wind tugged at the heavy aircraft, and the turbulence felt like being caught in the unpredictable current of a river. The air carried not just moisture, but also something indescribable: pressure, tension, and an unspoken unease. The kind of unease that seasoned aviators learn to ignore, but never truly escape. Narita, one of the busiest airports in the world, was accustomed to heavy traffic and challenging weather. But that morning, as the MD-11F approached for landing, the wind was particularly treacherous, buffeting the plane and shifting direction unpredictably. Control, FedEx 80 on approach to runway 34 left. Captain Mosley's voice sounded calm, though a trained ear might detect the tension in his tone. The cockpit was silent, broken only by communications with the tower and the sounds of onboard instruments. Landing gear deployed, flaps in the correct position. Standard procedures followed, but every movement of the aircraft signaled that this would not be an ordinary landing. The MD-11F was known for its complexity and occasional challenges in handling turbulence during approach. Despite the crew's experience, the aircraft was an unpredictable partner. The gusts of wind that morning were not steady. They came in bursts, a series of invisible punches aimed at the plane's fuselage. Every few seconds, the pilots would feel a lurch, the aircraft seemingly pushed off course by a malevolent force. And yet they pushed forward, focused entirely on bringing their aircraft and its valuable cargo safely to the ground. As the cargo plane approached the runway, it swayed dangerously in the relentless wind, its massive frame struggling against the turbulent air currents. Inside the terminal, those who noticed the plane watched in tense silence, sensing something was wrong. When the wheels finally touched the ground, it wasn't the smooth descent of a controlled landing. Instead, the plane slammed into the runway with bone-jarring force, the impact reverberating through its entire structure. Sparks flew from the landing gear as the aircraft groaned under the strain. The plane didn't settle. Instead, it lurched back into the air, bouncing violently from the force of the collision. Inside the cockpit, alarms blared incessantly, their shrill tones layering over the roaring engines and the howling wind. Add power. Captain Mosley's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. He and his co-pilot worked in unison, their movements swift and precise, driven by years of training and experience. But the storm was unyielding. The MD-11F, instead of regaining control, was caught in the grip of the elements. It began to descend again, this time hurtling toward the runway for an even more punishing impact. The second impact with the ground was utterly catastrophic. The aircraft struck at the wrong angle, causing the landing gear to collapse under the immense forces. The fuselage tilted uncontrollably. One wing smashed into the runway, and the entire aircraft disintegrated in a devastating series of events before flipping over and coming to a stop. Inside the cockpit, the crew had no time to react. The overwhelming speed and force of the crash left no room for survival. The wreckage of the aircraft skidded across the runway, tearing itself apart until it finally came to rest, engulfed in a massive inferno. Chaos erupted across Narita Airport. Alarms blared as emergency vehicles raced toward the crash site, their sirens slicing through the thick smoke rising high into the sky. The billowing black clouds could be seen from miles away, a grim signal of the disaster. In the terminal, silence replaced the usual bustle. Passengers and staff stood frozen, staring in shock at the scene unfolding outside. The sight of a once mighty aircraft reduced to a flaming wreck was incomprehensible. Some covered their mouths in disbelief, while others instinctively grabbed their phones to capture images and videos that would soon flood news outlets around the world. The fire was fierce and unrelenting. Thick, acrid smoke poured from the remains of the aircraft as flames consumed what little was left. The intensity of the heat made it nearly impossible for rescuers to get close, and despite their relentless efforts, there was little hope of finding survivors. The terminal, once filled with noise and movement, was now eerily quiet. People watched helplessly, many whispering prayers, others unable to look away from the unfolding tragedy. Grief and disbelief were etched into every face. Though it was a cargo flight, the loss felt deeply personal. The two crew members on board, both experienced and dedicated professionals, were now gone, leaving behind a profound sense of loss that rippled through everyone who witnessed the devastation. When the flames were finally extinguished and the smoke began to clear, the charred wreckage of FedEx Flight 80 lay exposed on the runway. The twisted remnants of the fuselage stood as a haunting reminder of life's fragility and the unpredictable power of fate. Investigators spent months examining the causes. They analyzed data from the flight recorders, communications with the tower, and weather reports. It was determined that strong crosswinds, adverse conditions, and possibly suboptimal decisions by the crew during the final seconds of approach contributed to the tragedy. This disaster became a warning, a training material, and a symbol that aviation always requires preparedness for the unpredictable. Even the most experienced pilots can find themselves in situations where the forces of nature and circumstances spiral out of control. The conclusions are painful, but necessary. FedEx 80 reminds us how thin the line is between a successful landing and a catastrophe. It's not just a matter of skill and procedures, but also the moment when nature reveals its brutal power. In this case, both man and machine lost the battle against forces that cannot be fully controlled. If you believe it's important to recall such stories to teach humility and awareness of risks, please like and comment on this content. Your support helps bring this message to more people. FedEx Flight 80 reminds us of how challenging and unforgiving the forces of nature can be. It's a story that shows even the most experienced pilots in advanced technologies can sometimes be powerless against unpredictable weather. Aviation disasters in the cargo industry aren't always caused by external forces. Sometimes, the danger comes from within the aircraft itself. Fires on board, toxic smoke, and rapidly escalating chaos. These are situations that truly test a crew's resilience and training. The next story takes us to the ill-fated flight of UP 6. Departing from Dubai on a quiet night, the flight began uneventfully aboard a modern Boeing 747-400 freighter. But everything changed in an instant when the first alarms sounded in the cockpit, signaling trouble. What was supposed to be a routine cargo flight quickly turned into a desperate battle against a relentless enemy fire. Aboard that aircraft, there was no room for error. Let's uncover the dramatic events that unfolded during this tragic flight. Captain Doug Lamp and First Officer Matthew Bell were experienced pilots, trusted with one of the largest cargo planes in the world, a Boeing 747 freighter. On September 3rd, 2010, they departed from Dubai on what was supposed to be a routine cargo flight. The aircraft carried tons of goods, including a shipment of lithium batteries, common yet potentially hazardous cargo. The plane ascended smoothly into the night sky. Below stretched a vast desert, bathed in darkness. For Lamp and Bell, it was business as usual, with nothing hinting at the catastrophe that was about to unfold. Minutes after takeoff, a shrill alarm cut through the quiet. Cargo fire warning. First officer called out, his eyes locked on the flashing indicator. Captain Lamp reacted immediately, gripping the controls and scanning the instruments. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," he declared over the radio. "UPS, Flight 6. We have a fire on board." Smoke began seeping into the cockpit, faint at first, but unmistakable. The sharp, acrid smell of burning materials filled the air. Both pilots reached for their oxygen masks, securing them tightly as they prepared for the worst. "We need to turn back to Dubai," Lamp said firmly. Matthew Bell relayed the emergency to air traffic control. "We're declaring an emergency. Request immediate clearance to return to Dubai." "Cleared for emergency return," came the controller's response. Lamp adjusted the aircraft's course, but the fire was already spreading faster than they could have anticipated. The smoke thickened, pouring into the cockpit like a relentless wave. It curled around the instruments, making it increasingly difficult to see. The acrid stench grew stronger, burning their throats even through the masks. "It's getting worse," First Officer said, his hands flying over the controls as he tried to stabilize the plane. In the cargo hold, the lithium batteries ignited one after another, creating small explosions that fed the inferno. The fire consumed everything in its path, overwhelming the plane's fire suppression systems. Flames began to breach the lower decks, and the heat rose dramatically. "We're losing systems," First Officer said, glancing at the flickering instrument panel. Lamp made a snap decision. "We're not going to make Dubai. Diverting to Sharjah. It's closer." First Officer Matthew Bell nodded and quickly radioed the new plan. "UPS, Flight 6, diverting to Sharjah. Request immediate clearance to land." "Cleared for emergency landing," the controller responded. The Boeing banked toward Sharjah, but the fire was relentless. Smoke turned the cockpit into a suffocating haze, and the oxygen masks struggled to keep up. "I can't see anything," First Officer shouted, wiping at the faceplate of his mask. "Trust the instruments," Lamp replied, though he knew many of the systems were already failing. The fire breached the cockpit, flames licking at the walls and melting wires. The heat was unbearable, turning the confined space into a furnace. The pilots struggled to keep control as the aircraft shuddered violently. Bell shouted over the roar of the inferno. "We're out of time!" Lamp remained focused. "We're getting her down. Hold steady." The desert loomed below, but the plane was slipping away from them. The controls became unresponsive, and the aircraft began to descend uncontrollably. "Come on," Lamp muttered, fighting against the inevitable. The final moments were chaos. The cockpit was engulfed in flames, and the plane plunged toward the desert. At 1 minute past 8 p.m., UPS Flight 6 slammed into the ground, erupting into a massive fireball. The explosion lit up the night sky, scattering debris across the sand. There were no survivors. In the aftermath, investigators worked tirelessly to determine what had gone wrong. The wreckage told a grim story. The fire had originated in the cargo hold, fueled by the lithium batteries. Once ignited, the batteries triggered a series of chemical reactions, creating intense heat and toxic fumes. The fire spread uncontrollably, overwhelming the aircraft's safety systems and leaving the crew with no chance of survival. Lithium batteries, so common in everyday life, proved to be a deadly hazard under the wrong conditions. Their volatility in extreme situations became the focus of widespread concern. The crash of UPS Flight 6 was a wake-up call for the aviation industry. New regulations were introduced to strictly control the transport of lithium batteries. Fire suppression systems were redesigned, and pilots were trained to handle in-flight fire emergencies with more precision. But for the families of Captain Doug Lamp and First Officer Matthew Bell, these changes came too late. Their loss was a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who navigate the skies, even on routine missions. UPS Flight 6 is a story of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. It stands as a testament to the dedication of pilots and the unforgiving nature of the challenges they face. UPS Flight 6 leaves us with the image of chaos and helplessness that played out inside a closed cockpit high above the ground. Despite their experience, the pilots faced a situation in which every breath turned into a struggle, and fire and smoke offered no mercy. For a brief moment, they might still have hoped, believed that there was some way to lead the aircraft out of this hell. But the seconds passed mercilessly, and the desperate attempts to restore normalcy brought no results. Nothing dispelled the suffocating darkness. No procedure could effectively extinguish the fire that, from within, tore apart the safety of the flight. This disaster makes it clear that the cargo deep inside the plane can be as dangerous as the most violent weather event. And fighting an invisible yet relentless enemy is one of the greatest trials a crew can face. At this point, I want to thank you for embarking with me on this journey through stories marked by fear, determination, and an end that, regrettably, came too soon. Recounting these events, analyzing the emotions and dramas unfolding in pilots' cockpits, requires time, energy, and sometimes considerable mental fortitude. If you appreciate the effort I put into presenting these stories, often overshadowed by larger, more widely known catastrophes, I ask for your support. It might be a subscription, a voluntary contribution, sharing this material, or any other form of showing that what I do matters to you. Thanks to you, I can continue addressing difficult topics and reach a broader audience that can understand how complex and unpredictable the skies can be. We now move on to one more story. After FedEx 80 and UPS 6, one might think we have seen it all. Struggling against the wind, fire, darkness, and extreme time pressure. Yet fate can still surprise. Difficulties do not always come from outside, like a sudden gust of wind or a destructive blaze. Sometimes the problem lies within the aircraft itself, in components that seemed reliable but fail at the most critical moment. Then the seconds become even more significant, and each movement of the controls becomes a desperate attempt to regain authority over a plane immersed in chaos. Now we shift to February 16th, 2000, to learn the fate of Emery Worldwide, Flight 17. That flight departed into the night, convinced it would be another routine step in the journey of transporting many tons of cargo to its destination. The crew did not anticipate anything unusual or any trap lurking in their smooth schedule. But shortly after takeoff, they faced a situation in which their skills and calmness were tested to the utmost. There was no time for lengthy analysis, no luxury of altitude or freedom to maneuver. The aircraft malfunctioned swiftly and mercilessly, forcing the pilots into a narrow corridor of possibilities with no easy escape. Unlike the previous stories, this time there was no destructive wind or creeping fire. Instead, it was the aircraft itself, its heart, its soul, and the steel nerves of its control lines that failed right when they were needed most. In such moments, the greatest threat is the lack of response, the rigid resistance, the silent refusal of systems that had previously obeyed. The Emery 17 crew had to face what is hardest: a loss of control, a lack of maneuverability where there is no margin for error. In a moment, you will enter the world of tonight's final tragedy, a story whose course sends shivers down your spine and shows how fragile aviation safety can be when the weakest link breaks at the worst possible time. You will see how quickly the order and routine of a flight can transform into a wild struggle to maintain stability, to hold on to every second in which one can still believe that there is even the faintest chance of averting disaster. Night of February 16, 2000, over Sacramento and California. Emery Worldwide Flight 17 stands on the apron of Mather Airport. A Douglas DC-8, a machine proven in numerous transport missions, awaits another assignment. The three-person crew, captain, first officer, and flight engineer, is focused on pre-flight procedures. In the cockpit, they follow the steps calmly, verifying documents, confirming the aircraft's technical status, checking the weather forecast. There are no particular threats. The weather is stable, no strong winds, no precipitation. The night sky is dark but clear. The airport's lighting ensures adequate visibility on the runway. The cargo rests in the holds, various goods. A standard transport operation. The aircraft waits only for the signal to start engines and begin taxiing. The crew finishes the checklists, going through each procedure. No alarms, no indications that this flight will be recorded as a tragic event in aviation history. The cockpit remains calm. Voices are low, factual, confident. These are professionals who know every flight demands attention and discipline. Air traffic control gives clearance for takeoff. The DC-8's engines come to life. Vibrations permeate the structure. The crew monitors power, temperature, and pressure. Everything is normal. The aircraft rolls on the apron, heading toward the runway. Positioning is precise and assured. The captain and first officer exchange brief remarks. Nothing unusual. There is always some tension during takeoff, but this is a routine phase of work. As the moment arrives to apply takeoff power, the engines intensify their sound. The aircraft gains speed. The crew monitors airspeed and directional stability. When the instruments show the proper values, the captain raises the nose. The wheels lift off the concrete. The DC-8 ascends into the darkness, leaving the airport lights behind. In the first seconds after liftoff, everything seems normal. The crew focuses on reaching the planned altitude and heading. But soon, they sense the controls are not responding as smoothly as they should. The captain tries to adjust the climb angle and heading. The aircraft does not respond as expected. The first officer watches the instruments. The engineer assesses parameters. No direct alarms, but the resistance felt on the controls is noticeable. The captain makes gentle movements to gauge the extent of the problem. Minutes pass quickly. The aircraft should be climbing steadily, but reactions to control inputs remain strange. The crew grows more alert. Short, tense exchanges follow. The captain wonders if this is a brief anomaly or something serious. Without certainty, he decides to remain vigilant and considers a quick return to Mather. The engineer checks the systems, but finds no immediate cause. The first officer scans the horizon and the instruments, analyzing whether the aircraft maintains its course and altitude. It soon becomes clear that the situation is serious. Attempts to level the flight path yield no expected results. The ailerons and rudder do not respond predictably. The captain decides an immediate return to Mather is necessary. He informs air traffic control. The controllers register the request, ready to assist, but unaware of the severity. The crew plans a quick turnback maneuver. The night over Sacramento provides no visual references, so they rely on instruments. The aircraft remains low. Turning back requires full control of the flight surfaces, which they do not have. The captain tries slight course corrections, avoiding any abrupt moves. The plane does not behave as intended. There are unwanted bank angles that the crew cannot fully correct. The engineer tries to identify a cause. Time is short. The first officer tries to help the captain hold the course, although this is increasingly difficult. Tension grows in the cockpit. Words are brief, commands clipped, and urgent attempts to regain stability. Nobody shouts, but there is a strained discipline. Every movement must be deliberate. Every second precious. The DC-8 does not gain altitude, nor does it stabilize. The crew feels time slipping away. The ground is close, and the margin for error minimal. The possibility of returning safely to the runway fades, as stable control is essential for the approach, and that control is absent. The aircraft begins banking dangerously. The crew tries to counteract, adjusting engine power, hoping for some directional stability. Nothing works as intended. Anxiety and determination intermingle the cockpit. The captain tries different solutions, small adjustments, but none bring the desired result. The engineer inspects, switches, and levers, searching for a clue. Everything happens too fast. The crew informs the tower of their control troubles. The controllers may suggest a runway or give vectors, but there is no time for detailed discussion. The DC-8 continues to lose altitude. The city lights below approach dangerously. There are no chances for a calm maneuver. The aircraft is heavy, loaded with cargo, difficult to control in such a state. The crew tries everything, adjusting power, flaps, rudder inputs. The flight instruments reveal no stability. Seconds pass, height diminishes. The captain knows time is running out. Each attempt fails. The aircraft wobbles, resists their inputs. The first officer and engineer provide whatever support they can, but the plane defies all efforts. Bank angle increases. Airspeed is insufficient to maintain a stable climb. Altitude is too low for a second attempt. The crew struggles until the last moment. Bodies tense, eyes fixed on the gauges, hands gripping controls and throttles. There is no time to consider alternate solutions. The ground comes closer at an alarming rate. Attempts to correct the course fail. Nothing offers relief from the impending disaster. The aircraft impacts the ground violently. A powerful shock shatters the night's silence. The DC-8 breaks apart. Cargo and structural elements scatter. Fuel spills and ignites instantly. Flames surge, illuminating the wreckage and debris. There is no chance for the crew. All three perish on impact. The fight ends with destruction and fire. After the crash, silence returns, broken only by flames crackling and distant sirens. Emergency responders arrive, but no one can be saved. In the following days and weeks, investigators will analyze the flight recorders, examine the control systems to understand what caused the failure. They will spend time on technical details and write reports. But at this moment, the essential fact is that 3 lives ended abruptly. The aircraft is gone, leaving twisted metal and scattered cargo. This story offers no uplifting resolution. The events unfolded inexorably. The crew gave everything they had experienced, skill, determination, but the aircraft's controls failed them. The low altitude left no options. Every second mattered, but nothing helped. These individuals understood the stakes and struggled to save the situation until the end. But reality was merciless. The Emory Worldwide Flight 17 disaster shook the aviation community. Even if it did not become as famous as other large-scale tragedies, it remains in memory for those who understand that any control system failure can be fatal so soon after takeoff, leaving no room for standard emergency procedures. The outcome is a harsh reminder that sometimes routine procedures and skill cannot overcome mechanical faults at critical moments. In later years, certain inspections and recommendations would be made to improve the reliability of flight control systems, to emphasize thorough checks before flight. But for the crew and their families, these changes come too late. The crash already happened, claiming 3 lives. Nothing can erase the tension and horror of those final minutes. No amount of analysis or system improvements can bring them back. It serves as a grim testament that even professional pilots trained for countless scenarios can face a situation where their expertise is not enough. A single mechanical failure can shatter all plans and leave no path to safety for those who study accidents. Emory Worldwide Flight 17 stands as an example where a sudden, unforeseen control failure at low altitude made recovery possible. The crew had no time to devise alternatives, no chance to implement emergency procedures, no altitude to maneuver. This incident reminds us that not all problems can be solved in flight, and that sometimes fate strikes too quickly. 24 years after the event, it is still remembered. It shows that, despite hundreds of procedures and safeguards, aviation can face moments when no checklist or training can prevent tragedy. Emory Worldwide Flight 17 is one of those moments. This is not a story of glaring pilot error, violent storms, or poor judgment. It is a scenario in which the machine refused to obey, leaving the crew with no tools to regain control. No experience or calm calculation could fix what happened. There was no time, no altitude, no miracle solution. The failure emerged at the worst possible moment, and the aircraft never regained stable flight. The darkness of night intensifies the sense of isolation and hopelessness. Without visual landmarks, no time remains for complicated maneuvers. If the controls had worked correctly, the crew might have climbed to a safe altitude, diagnosed the problem, attempted a return. Instead, the defect revealed itself too soon and too low. The result was inevitable. The flames and smoke that followed the crash leave no doubt about the finality of the outcome. No survivors, only wreckage. Rescuers extinguish the fires, gather fragments. Investigators will later find mechanical issues, but for the crew, it is too late. They fought a losing battle, one decided by mechanical failure and lack of altitude. This story conveys no solace. It is a reminder of how vulnerable even the most experienced professionals are when technology fails at critical moments. It illustrates the fragility of human life in aviation. When confronted by sudden, irreparable faults that erase the possibility of safe recovery. Dear passengers, Captain Shadow speaking. If you can support my work, every bit of help, even the smallest matters. Leave like, comment, or subscribe. The night is eerily quiet above as we descend. We move minute by minute lower through dark sky. This was meant as a short flight. Overall, scarcely 39 minutes carry us from Zurich. We head toward Bolzano's sheltered basin now. Outside lies an endless cloak of darkness, unseen. It drapes over this cold world in silence. We barely discern faint outlines of distant mountains. Their forms stand like silent guardians through centuries. Inside the cockpit, a delicate hush prevails. Now, instruments emit a gentle glow here tonight. Each needle whispers its own subtle truth quietly. The engines purr steadily powerful, stable in darkness. They offer something like a lullaby above. At first glance, this journey seems utterly ordinary today. It is just another routine crossing through quiet airspace. Yet tonight, Something heavier presses upon our minds. A strange weight settles firmly inside our chests. These are not random thoughts drifting without pattern. They are reflections on tragedies once high above. They drift like slow, somber ghosts through memory. In this brief voyage, we recall certain events. They shook the aviation world down to its core. We remember stories where people fought for life. Not flawless landings or records, but essential existence. We have spoken softly of 3 dark disasters. FedEx Flight 80, UPS Flight 6, Emory, Worldwide 17. All 3 were cargo flights ending in horror. Each took place at different times undisguised. Each had distinct reasons for terror and tragedy. Yet all share a legacy of loss profound. Each demands humility from those who dare soar. Aviation is statistically safe, yet nightmares can strike. Mere seconds can unleash sudden, overwhelming darkness. Consider FedEx Flight 80 on 23rd March. The year was 2009. At Narita, a McDonnell Douglas MD-11 freighter approached runway. The crew's experience was formidable, their training thorough. But now the atmosphere became a hidden foe. This invisible, gentle ocean of air turned savage. Landing attempts morphed into brutal struggles for control. The aircraft overturned, disintegrated into fierce fireball. Within seconds, 2 human lives were lost forever. The wind remained indifferent, unstoppable, cruel, beyond measure. Then consider UPS Flight 6 on 3rd September. The year was 2010 over Dubai. A Boeing 747-400 rose. It carried routine cargo under calm conditions here. The crew was seasoned systems, worked with efficiency, but danger smoldered unseen deep within the hold. Suddenly fire erupted, furious, unrestrained beyond mercy. Flames filled the interior with toxic, choking smoke. Heat became unbearable. Time turned into cruel enemy. The pilots tried turning back to find salvation. They searched desperately for a safe runway nearby. The flames raged, unchecked, fed by rushing air. No human skill could quell that fierce inferno. This aircraft never returned. It fell to fate. The crew lost their struggle with hidden terror. This warns that threats can lurk inside cargo. Emory Worldwide Flight 17 on 16th February 2000. It took off from Sacramento, California that morning. A Douglas DC-8 freight carrier rose skyward. The crew experienced discipline, fully prepared for flight. Yet just after leaving, ground control vanished abruptly. Suddenly, every yoke movement meant nothing at all. No second chances, no clever improvisation emerged here. The airplane rebellious slipped beyond the crew's grasp. Within minutes, it plunged back toward the earth. Impact shattered metal dreams, hopes, and precious lives. This stark reminder shows technology can fail viciously. No measure of skill overcomes a mutinous machine. What unites these 3 grim tragedies we recall? They illuminate the slender line between routine flight. A simple crossing can become a cataclysm suddenly. Confident crews expected another normal mission completed. None anticipated mortal struggles within mere minutes. They fought not for schedules, but raw survival itself. Each story bears shock, helplessness, bitter elements combined. One faced merciless winds, another a raging inferno. The third endured treacherous mechanical failure, unstoppable, unforgiving. No simple maneuver turned back the rising tide. In each cockpit sat human beings, warm, fragile. They carried dreams, fatigue, quiet hopes for peace. When nature or fate bears fangs, knowledge shatters. Training slams against realities that will not yield. There is also a thread of learning remembered. Aviation, though shaken, never drifts forward blindly now. Each tragedy is examined, dissected, studied carefully, thoroughly. From charred wreckage, from silent grief, emerge lessons. New procedures arise. New regulations find proper place. More thorough inspections, stricter checks become standard practice. Through painful lessons, we slowly improve methods here. Pilots, engineers now stand on shoulders of loss. They carry sharper awareness, better tools, more vigilance. Each downfall leaves urgent calls for watchful eyes. As we descend gently into Bolzano's darkness tonight, the outside gloom seems friendlier as we return. Soon the quiet lights of sleeping city shimmer. They glow like distant guardians of peaceful silence. Down below, people slumber, unaware of our presence. We navigate subtle poetry of air and lift. We possess a functioning aircraft, stable, conditions control. In moments we touch runway, breathe crisp dolomite air. Bolzano's quiet ramp reminds us of balanced harmony. Here, the human hand and engineering marvel align. Not everyone finds fortune upon final approach. Not all flights conclude with smooth, certain endings. FedEx 80 burned fierce you. PS6 choked on smoke. Emery 17 plunged earthward, broken beyond all hope. These stand in stark contrast to our tranquil arrival. They remind us safety is a fragile gift. We must nurture and protect it. Never take slightly. If these deeper perspectives on flights resonate now, if it matters to recall raw, authentic struggles, not just glossy statistics, but muted screams long past, please consider supporting this work, preserving these stories. A voluntary contribution, a kind comment, a share. Even the smallest gesture helps keep this alive. Such support grants me time to uncover truths. We give voice to those who can't speak today. Behind every flight number cargo manifests scheduled departure, we find human beings with trembling, hopeful hands. Your support turns silent archives into living testaments. Together, we illuminate overlooked chapters of aviation's past. We remind a fast-paced world that progress costs. Bravery does not always smile triumphantly up here. Courage can succumb to fate. Efforts can fail. Warnings infused with lessons echo inside these stories. No matter how trained or careful we become, forces exist that surpass human skill or command. So let these events linger in collective memory. A litany of cautionary tales told with care. They underscore that flight remains tied to unpredictability. Let them make us humbler, grateful for safe landings. With your encouragement, we shine lights on truths. No lessons should fade into silent, unknown darkness. We carry these warnings forward into tomorrow's skies.
$300.